The encounter. Max was a young boy, no older than 14, who had always believed in helping others. He lived on a distant alien planet, surrounded by strange, towering cities and beings unlike anything on Earth. But despite the advanced technology and the powerful creatures that roamed the streets, Max had always felt out of place. He didn't care much for the strange alien customs. He simply tried to live a peaceful life, believing that kindness was still the most important thing. One bright morning, as Max walked through the crowded marketplace, he noticed something that stopped him in his tracks. On the edge of the square, tucked away in a dark corner, sat a beggar. Her clothes were ragged and torn, and her face was hidden beneath a veil of long, tangled hair. People walked by her without a second glance. The alien inhabitants of the city, with their long limbs and towering forms, paid her no attention. They were too busy with their own lives to care about someone who had nothing. Max's heart ached as he watched the beggar, sitting alone in the cold shadows. While the aliens passed by without even a glance, Max couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. He wasn't like the others. To him, every life mattered, no matter how small or insignificant it seemed to others. He approached the beggar slowly, his footsteps quiet against the hum of the busy marketplace. When he reached her, he hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to help. But then he remembered the small piece of bread in his pocket, left over from his breakfast. It wasn't much, but it was something. Gently, he knelt down beside the beggar and offered her the bread. "Excuse me, miss," Max said softly. "I have some food. Would you like it?" The beggar slowly raised her head, her face hidden in shadow. Her eyes were dark, but there was a faint glow in them that Max couldn't quite understand. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she simply reached out and took the bread from his hand, her fingers cold but steady. Max smiled, glad to have helped, and was about to stand up when something unexpected happened. The sound of laughter filled the air. Max looked up, surprised to see a group of alien beings standing nearby. They were tall, with pale skin and glowing eyes, dressed in shining, armor-like suits. They were laughing at him, pointing and snickering. "Look at this human boy," one of them sneered. "Helping a beggar. How pathetic." Another alien stepped forward, its mouth twisting into a cruel smile. "Does he think he can change the world with one small act of kindness? What a fool." The aliens continued to laugh, their voices loud and mocking. Max felt his cheeks flush with embarrassment, but he didn't move. He had done nothing wrong. The beggar had needed help, and he had given it. That was all that mattered. Why help someone like her? Another alien spat. "She's just a worthless beggar. She can't do anything for you." Max didn't respond to their taunts. Instead, he turned back to the beggar. She hadn't spoken yet, but there was a strange calm about her now. She didn't seem troubled by the mocking aliens. In fact, she seemed almost serene. Max stood up and turned to face the group of aliens. His hands were clenched into fists, but he didn't back down. "It doesn't matter if she's a beggar or not. Everyone deserves kindness. That's all that matters to me." The aliens looked at him with disbelief, as if they couldn't understand why anyone would care for someone so insignificant in their eyes. One of them scoffed and turned away, muttering something about the foolishness of humans. Max, though, didn't care. He had done the right thing, and that was enough for him. As the aliens walked off, still mocking him, Max turned back to the beggar. He smiled at her again, but she didn't smile back. Instead, she looked up at him with a strange intensity in her eyes. There was something in those eyes that Max couldn't quite place, something deep and ancient, like she knew more than she was letting on. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. Max's heart skipped a beat. The beggar's voice was filled with a quiet power that seemed to resonate with the very air around them. He stared at her, wondering why she seemed so different. Why did she seem so familiar, even though he had never seen her before? Before he could ask, the beggar lowered her head again, hiding her face beneath her hair. But as she did, Max saw something in her eyes, a faint glow, like the soft shimmer of stars. It was as if there was more to this woman than met the eye, more than the ragged clothes and the tired expression, more than the beggar that everyone had ignored. Max turned away, but something tugged at his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had just met someone important, someone who wasn't just a beggar, someone who was somehow connected to something much bigger than he could understand. The marketplace grew louder around him, but Max felt a sudden chill run down his spine. He glanced back at the beggar one last time, but she had disappeared into the shadows, leaving only the faintest trace of her presence behind. Max's curiosity lingered as he walked home, but he couldn't explain why. It was just a simple act of kindness, yet it felt like something more. Something was hidden beneath the surface of that woman, something that no one else seemed to notice. As Max reached his home, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the last time he would encounter the mysterious beggar. Little did he know, his small act of kindness had set off a chain of events that would change the galaxy forever. But for now, all he could do was wonder, who was that woman? And why did she seem so important? The hidden power. The days following Max's encounter with the beggar were strange. He couldn't stop thinking about the woman. Her face, though hidden, seemed to haunt his mind. The glow in her eyes, the soft power in her voice, it all felt like something far greater than just a beggar on the streets. Max returned to his usual life, walking through the same crowded streets, but everything felt different. His steps felt heavier, as if something unseen was pulling him towards an unknown destiny. It was as if the universe had shifted, and his small act of kindness had set something in motion, something he couldn't yet understand. Then, one evening, after Max finished his work at the market, he saw her again. The beggar. She was standing at the same corner, but this time, she was not sitting on the ground. She was standing tall, her face no longer hidden beneath her hair, and her posture radiated an aura of strength. The once weak, tired woman had transformed into someone regal. The glow in her eyes had grown brighter, almost blinding in the dimming light of the city. Max froze in his tracks. It was as if she had been waiting for him. He didn't even need to think twice. He walked toward her again, his heart pounding in his chest. Are you really the same person?" Max asked hesitantly, his voice full of wonder and confusion. The woman smiled faintly. There was no trace of the tiredness or the defeat that had once defined her. Instead, she had a serene expression, a peaceful strength that seemed to come from somewhere deep within her soul. "I am who I appear to be," she replied in a voice that seemed to echo around him, though she spoke softly. "But I am also much more." Max's eyes widened. There was something in her tone, something ancient and wise. For the first time, he noticed the subtle glow of her skin. It was faint, like the shimmer of distant stars, and yet there was an undeniable power within her. "I don't understand," Max said, feeling a sudden sense of fear creeping up his spine. "You're not just a beggar, are you?" The woman shook her head slowly, as if the question itself was too simple for what was about to be revealed. She looked around them, ensuring no one was close enough to overhear, then took a step closer to Max. "Listen carefully, young one," she said, her voice low but clear. "I am not just a beggar. I was once the ruler of an entire empire, a queen of a race that controlled vast territories in this galaxy. But a great betrayal left me stranded here, in hiding, forgotten by my own people." Max's mouth went dry. He had never heard anything like this before. A queen, an empire. It all sounded like something out of a fairy tale, not something that could happen in the real world, especially not in a place so foreign and full of strange beings. But as he looked at her, he couldn't deny the weight of her words. There was an authority in her presence, an undeniable power that left him speechless. "You're a queen," Max repeated, still unsure whether he was dreaming or not. "But why were you hiding? You're so powerful. I can feel it." The woman nodded, the faint glow in her eyes dimming slightly. I was betrayed, left for dead by those I trusted. They did not see the value in me anymore. They saw me as weak, insignificant, just like the rest of the universe does. So I was cast aside, forced to hide, to wait for the right moment. Max couldn't believe it. The woman who had been a beggar, the one everyone had ignored, was now telling him she was royalty. She was once a queen. "But why didn't you say something earlier?" Max asked. "Why didn't you show them who you really are?" The woman's face darkened, the power in her eyes flaring up for a brief moment. "I couldn't," she said softly. "My enemies are everywhere. Even now, they are watching me, waiting for any sign of weakness. If they knew I was still alive, they would do everything in their power to silence me, to erase me from existence. That is why I have remained hidden." Max was silent for a moment, taking in the gravity of what she had just revealed. His mind raced. The beggar he had helped was not just a helpless woman. She was the queen of a lost empire, the rightful ruler of a galaxy that had forgotten her. But then another thought struck him. "If you're this powerful," Max said, his voice trembling slightly, "why not just take back your throne? Why come to me?" The woman's eyes softened. She took a step closer to him, her presence both calming and intimidating. "Because I need your help, Max," she said, her voice filled with quiet urgency. "You have something I do not. The kindness you showed me, the compassion, it is something that my enemies have lost. It is something they fear." Max blinked, confused. "Me? But I'm just a kid. I don't have any power. What could I do?" She smiled again, a faint, knowing smile. "You have more power than you think. You see, young one, there are two forces at play in this galaxy, those who rule with fear and those who rule with love. I ruled with love once, and I was betrayed because of it. But now I see hope in you. The kindness you have shown me, it's not just a simple act. It's the beginning of something much bigger." Max didn't fully understand what she meant, but he could feel the weight of her words. His chest tightened, as though he had just been thrust into something far beyond his control. His life had been simple before, helping people, doing what he could. But now, it seemed as though the universe was calling on him to do something much greater, something that would change everything. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Max whispered. The queen's gaze softened as she placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip surprisingly firm despite her appearance. "You don't need to be ready, Max. You just need to trust in what you've already done. Your heart is pure, and that is more powerful than you realize." Max took a deep breath. His life had just changed in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. He had no idea where this path would lead, but one thing was certain. He was no longer just a boy in the marketplace. He was part of something much larger than himself. And the queen's journey, his journey, was only beginning. The revelation. The days after Max's encounter with the beggar-turned-queen were filled with a strange sense of unease. He couldn't stop thinking about her words. The simple act of offering bread to a woman on the streets had somehow thrown him into a world far beyond his comprehension. It was as if his life had collided with a hidden truth, a truth that had been kept from him, from everyone. The queen had told him that she once ruled over an empire, a vast kingdom that spanned across the galaxy. But she had also told him that she was betrayed. She had been forced into hiding, lost to time, and the shadows of history. Max couldn't quite wrap his mind around it. How could such a powerful ruler be reduced to a beggar on the streets of this strange planet? One evening, as Max walked home from his daily tasks, he noticed something different. The air around him felt charged, as if something was about to happen. His footsteps quickened as he entered the dimly lit alley leading to his home. But just as he turned the corner, he saw her again, the queen. This time, however, she was not alone. Standing beside her were several towering alien figures, dressed in dark armor and with cold, calculating eyes. Their presence radiated authority, and they seemed to tower over Max, making him feel small and powerless. The Queen turned her gaze to Max as he approached, and for a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The world around him vanished, leaving only the two of them in the alley. There was an intensity in her eyes, something ancient, something fierce. "Max," she said softly, her voice steady, but filled with a quiet urgency. "It's time for you to know the truth." Max stopped in his tracks. The air felt thick, as if the weight of her words hung in the very atmosphere. He could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on him, but he didn't know what to say. His heart raced, his breath quickened. What could possibly be the truth that was so important? The Queen motioned for the alien figures to step aside. As they did, a small holographic display flickered to life in the air in front of them. Max blinked as the image slowly took shape, first as a blurry shadow, then as something more defined. It was a galaxy map, filled with shining stars, intricate lines connecting various planets and star systems. In the center of it all was a massive, glowing planet. Max's breath caught in his throat as he recognized it, the planet he was standing on now. "This is where it all began," the Queen said, her tone heavy with meaning. "This is where I was born. This is where I ruled, where my empire flourished. But this is also where my downfall started." Max watched in silence as the Queen pointed to the planet, then to several other worlds surrounding it. "I was the ruler of an empire that spanned the stars. We were peaceful, just, and powerful. But there were those who craved power, those who wanted to control not just our planet, but the entire galaxy. They betrayed me. They betrayed everything I had built." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Max could feel the tension in the air. The quiet hum of the holographic map seemed to grow louder as the Queen continued. "Those who betrayed me are still here," she said, her eyes narrowing. "They've stayed in the shadows, manipulating everything from behind the scenes. The beings you see walking the streets, the ones who mocked you for helping me, they're part of the empire that tore mine apart." Max's mind raced. He looked around, unsure of what to think. The aliens who had laughed at him, who had treated him like he was foolish for offering kindness, could they really be part of something so vast, so dangerous? He had thought they were just normal citizens, living their lives in this strange world. But now, it seemed they were more than that. They were pawns in something much larger, something dark. "But why didn't they come after you?" Max asked, struggling to understand. "If they betrayed you, why didn't they just finish the job? Why let you live?" The Queen's gaze softened for a moment, but her eyes remained filled with sadness. "Because they believed I was dead. They thought they had killed me. They thought they had wiped me from existence. But they were wrong." She turned away from the holographic display and looked Max directly in the eyes. "They underestimated me, Max. They thought they could erase me and my power. But I am still here. I am still alive, and I will take back what was once mine." Max felt a rush of emotions flood through him: fear, awe, and a deep sense of disbelief. He had never imagined anything like this in his wildest dreams. He was just a boy, a human on an alien world, and now he was part of a story that stretched across galaxies, involving betrayal, power, and a queen's quest for justice. "But why me?" Max asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why did you come to me? I'm just a normal kid. What can I do?" The Queen smiled, but it wasn't a smile of kindness. It was a smile of quiet certainty. "Because, Max, you are the key. You are the one who can help me bring them down." Max's confusion deepened. "What do you mean? What's so special about me?" The Queen placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip gentle but firm. "You have something they do not. The kindness you showed me. That is what they fear the most. They rule with cruelty, with power, and with fear. But you, Max, you have the strength of compassion. That is something they can never control. And it is that very strength that will help us bring them down." Max swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. He was just a boy, an ordinary boy who had done something simple, something kind. And now, somehow, that simple act had turned him into something much more important. He had been drawn into a war between the forces of love and fear, between a queen who had been betrayed and an empire that had forgotten her. "Are you ready to stand with me, Max?" the queen asked, her voice soft but filled with power. "Are you ready to fight for what is right?" Max stood there, looking into her eyes. For a moment, he hesitated. The fear inside him threatened to take over, but something inside him told him that this was his moment, his chance to make a difference. "Yes," Max whispered, his voice steady. "I'll help you." The queen nodded, her eyes shining with approval. "Then let's begin." The first move. The days that followed Max's agreement to help the queen were filled with a strange, electric tension. He had once been an ordinary boy, living the simple life, but now he was involved in something much larger, something dangerous, something that could change the fate of entire worlds. He had no idea what the queen's empire looked like, nor did he fully understand the scope of the war she had been fighting, but he knew one thing for sure: things would never be the same. The queen, whose name Max had learned was Elara, had promised him that she would teach him what he needed to know. She explained that the first step in her plan was to gather allies, those who had escaped her enemy's control and were waiting for the right moment to rise up. These allies were scattered across the galaxy, hiding on different planets, in different star systems. But to find them, they needed something: a signal. Max had never even imagined the scale of her empire. The holographic map she had shown him was just the tip of the iceberg. Elara's empire had been vast, with thousands of planets under her rule, but now it was shattered. Her enemies had scattered her forces, and only a few loyalists remained, hidden and waiting for her to return. Max's first mission was simple: to help Elara send out a beacon, a signal to her old allies, a call to arms. The signal would be small, hidden within the vast expanse of space, but it had to be sent from a specific location, a place known only to those loyal to her, a place hidden deep within the planet's most dangerous sector, surrounded by war zones and enemy patrols. Elara had chosen Max for this task, not just because he was the only one who had shown her kindness, but because of something else. He had an innate ability to connect with the world around him, to understand things others couldn't. That, combined with his lack of fear in the face of the unknown, made him the perfect candidate for a mission so risky. They set out at nightfall. The queen and her few trusted alien allies accompanied Max, moving quickly through the city to avoid detection. Max's heart pounded as they traveled. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every alley a trap. The city, which once seemed so familiar, now felt like a maze, alive with danger. As they approached the outskirts of the city, the group entered a heavily guarded zone, where the ruling empire's forces kept a tight grip. Alien soldiers, uniformed in black armor, patrolled the streets, their movements swift and cold. Max had to force himself to stay calm, to breathe, to keep his heart from racing. This was it, his first real test. Elara led the group with ease, her presence commanding the shadows to part. She moved with such grace and authority that even the air seemed to obey her. Max couldn't help but admire her. She had once ruled an empire, and even now she carried that aura with her. Her power wasn't just physical, it was something deeper, something ancient. "We need to reach the communications tower," Elara whispered. "It's our only chance. The beacon has to be sent from there, and once it's done, the signal will travel across the galaxy. We'll have no time to waste." Max nodded, his mind whirling. The communications tower was at the heart of enemy territory, a heavily fortified structure that controlled all communication for the region. It was surrounded by checkpoints, guards, and the ever-watchful eye of the Empire. But Max had seen the determination in Elara's eyes, and he knew she wasn't one to back down. They'd reached the edge of the tower's perimeter, and the full scale of the security hit Max. Armed guards stood every few meters, their eyes scanning the area with military precision. This was not just an ordinary facility. It was a fortress. Alara held up her hand, signaling for the group to stop. She looked at Max, her expression serious. "Do you understand what this means?" she asked, her voice low. "Once we activate the beacon, there's no turning back. The Empire will know we're here. It will start a war." Max hesitated. A war? He had been pulled into something that was now much larger than he had ever imagined. The stakes were higher than anything he could have dreamed. But as he looked at Alara, he realized that he had already made his choice. There was no going back now. "I understand," Max replied quietly. "Let's do it." Alara gave him a brief, approving nod before turning to her allies. They moved as one, silently and swiftly. The group split into smaller units, each taking a different route to avoid drawing attention. Max followed Alara, his heart racing as they crept closer to the tower. The closer they got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Max could feel the weight of the Empire's presence hanging over them, like a dark cloud waiting to strike. The city, once full of life and noise, now felt like a silent predator, its every movement calculated, its every sound a threat. Finally, they reached the tower's base, where a small maintenance entrance lay hidden behind a stack of crates. Alara's sharp eyes caught sight of it immediately. She led the group through the entrance, and they descended into the tower's lower levels, avoiding the main security paths. The deeper they went, the more Max began to understand the true scope of their mission. This wasn't just about sending a signal. It was about sending a message that said the Queen had returned, and that humanity, Max, was ready to rise up alongside her. They weren't just taking back an empire. They were taking back their place in the galaxy. They reached the central communications hub. Alara quickly set to work, activating the console that controlled the beacon. Max watched her hands move with practiced precision, her eyes focused on the screens as she typed in codes he didn't understand. "This is it," she whispered as she pressed the final command. "The beacon is live." Max's breath caught in his throat. The signal was now out there, traveling through the galaxy, a call to arms for Alara's allies. But even as he felt the excitement of their victory, a shadow fell across his heart. The Empire would know, and the war was about to begin. The Empire strikes back. The quiet hum of the communication hub servers was interrupted by the sudden whir of alarms. Max's heart skipped a beat. Alara had barely finished activating the beacon when the first warning lights blinked to life, turning the room an ominous shade of red. His mind raced. He knew that the signal they had sent out was going to alert the Empire, but he hadn't expected a response this quickly. The Queen's eyes narrowed, her calm demeanor unwavering despite the sudden chaos. "They know," she said softly, her voice sharp with urgency. "We've triggered their defenses. They'll come for us now." Max's pulse hammered in his ears. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The Empire wasn't going to let them slip away quietly. They had just made the most dangerous move in the entire rebellion. And now, the Empire was going to make them pay. Alara immediately began working with frantic speed, her fingers flying across the control panel as she input commands and rerouted systems to try and obscure their signal. But even as she worked, Max could see her face harden. They were no longer in the shadows. They were exposed, and the Empire was on its way. "We have minutes," Alara said, turning to Max and the rest of the team. "We have to move. Now." Max nodded, his body going into motion before his mind could fully catch up. Alara's allies were already moving toward the exit, but the weight of what was happening started to settle in. Their mission, so carefully planned, was falling apart faster than Max could comprehend. The beacon they had sent out wasn't just a signal, it was a challenge, a declaration of war. Alara held up her hand, signaling for the group to stop. She looked at Max, her expression serious. "Do you understand what this means?" she asked, her voice low. "Once we activate the beacon, there's no turning back. The Empire will know we're here. It will start a war." Max hesitated. A war? He had been pulled into something that was now much larger than he had ever imagined. The stakes were higher than anything he could have dreamed. But as he looked at Alara, he realized that he had already made his choice. There was no going back now. "I understand," Max replied quietly. "Let's do it." Alara gave him a brief, approving nod before turning to her allies. They moved as one, silently and swiftly. The group split into smaller units, each taking a different route to avoid drawing attention. Max followed Alara, his heart racing as they crept closer to the tower. The closer they got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Max could feel the weight of the Empire's presence hanging over them, like a dark cloud waiting to strike. The city, once full of life and noise, now felt like a silent predator, its every movement calculated, its every sound a threat. Finally, they'd reached the tower's base, where a small maintenance entrance lay hidden behind a stack of crates. Alara's sharp eyes caught sight of it immediately. She led the group through the entrance, and they descended into the tower's lower levels, avoiding the main security paths. The deeper they went, the more Max began to understand the true scope of their mission. This wasn't just about sending a signal. It was about sending a message. A message that said the Queen had returned, and that humanity, Max, was ready to rise up alongside her. They weren't just taking back an empire. They were taking back their place in the galaxy. They reached the central communications hub. Alara quickly set to work, activating the console that controlled the beacon. Max watched her hands move with practiced precision, her eyes focused on the screens as she typed in codes he didn't understand. "This is it," she whispered as she pressed the final command. "The beacon is live." Max's breath caught in his throat. The signal was now out there, traveling through the galaxy, a call to arms for Alara's allies. But even as he felt the excitement of their victory, a shadow fell across his heart. The Empire would know, and the war was about to begin. The Empire strikes back. The quiet hum of the communication hub servers was interrupted by the sudden whir of alarms. Max's heart skipped a beat. Alara had barely finished activating the beacon when the first warning lights blinked to life, turning the room an ominous shade of red. His mind raced. He knew that the signal they had sent out was going to alert the Empire, but he hadn't expected a response this quickly. The Queen's eyes narrowed, her calm demeanor unwavering despite the sudden chaos. "They know," she said softly, her voice sharp with urgency. "We've triggered their defenses. They'll come for us now." Max's pulse hammered in his ears. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The Empire wasn't going to let them slip away quietly. They had just made the most dangerous move in the entire rebellion. And now, the Empire was going to make them pay. Alara immediately began working with frantic speed, her fingers flying across the control panel as she input commands and rerouted systems to try and obscure their signal. But even as she worked, Max could see her face harden. They were no longer in the shadows. They were exposed, and the Empire was on its way. "We have minutes," Alara said, turning to Max and the rest of the team. "We have to move. Now." Max nodded, his body going into motion before his mind could fully catch up. Alara's allies were already moving toward the exit, but the weight of what was happening started to settle in. Their mission, so carefully planned, was falling apart faster than Max could comprehend. The beacon they had sent out wasn't just a signal, it was a challenge, a declaration of war. The war begins. Max ran through the dark streets, his mind racing. The distant explosions still echoed in his ears, and the rumbling of approaching warships reverberated in his chest. The signal had gone out. The rebellion had begun. But he was alone, and the full weight of what they had set in motion was just beginning to dawn on him. The Empire had been ruthless, and it wasn't going to stop until every trace of the rebellion was wiped out. As Max sprinted through the narrow alleys, his thoughts turned to Alara. She had risked everything for the cause, creating a diversion to give him a chance to escape. But Max didn't think for a second that she would stay behind. Alara was strong, powerful, and resourceful. She wouldn't just surrender, she would fight. He had no doubt that she was already preparing the next move, but that didn't make him feel any less anxious. The Empire would be coming for her, and without the Queen, the rebellion would be crushed. Max knew that he had to find a way to help. There had to be something he could do, but he couldn't do it alone. He reached the edge of the city, where the towering spires of the Empire's control centers gave way to a quiet open field. Here, far from the heart of the conflict, Max could breathe for a moment. He stopped to catch his breath, his chest heaving. But as he looked around, something caught his eye. The faintest shimmer of light in the distance, an unmistakable shape. A ship. His heart skipped a beat. Alara's ship. It was tucked behind a line of trees, hidden from view by the chaos unfolding in the city. The sleek, silver vessel gleamed under the moonlight, its engines quiet as it waited. Max's pulse quickened. He had to reach it, and fast. The warships would be over the city any minute now. The rebellion was only just beginning, but the enemy had already mobilized. He rushed toward the ship, the weight of the situation settling deeper into his bones. The Empire's response had been swift, faster than he could have imagined. They had been prepared for something like this, and now every second counted. As he neared the ship, the hatch opened, and a figure stepped out. It was one of Alara's loyal allies, a tall, broad-shouldered alien with pale blue skin and glowing eyes. Max recognized him immediately. Corin, Alara's second-in-command. "You're here," Corin said, his voice gravelly, but there was a hint of relief in his eyes. "We were beginning to worry." Max didn't waste any time. "Where is Alara? We have to get to her. The Empire will come for her. She needs us." Corin's eyes darkened. Alara is fighting her own battle. She knew this would happen, but she's not the only one we need to worry about. The Empire is already making moves. We need to regroup and form a plan. Max didn't argue. He knew Corin was right. There was no time for hesitation. The Empire wouldn't wait for them to get ready. They were already attacking. Corin motioned for Max to follow him into the ship. Once inside, the door sealed shut behind them, and the ship powered up. The ship's systems came to life with a soft hum, and a holographic map projected in front of Max's eyes. The map showed the positions of multiple enemy fleets, each one closing in on the planet's orbit. There were at least 5 massive warships, each capable of decimating entire cities with a single strike. Max's eyes widened in horror. The Empire had mobilized an entire armada just to hunt them down. "We don't have much time," Corin said, his voice grave. "Alara's ship is still in the city, but the longer we wait, the harder it will be to get to her. The Empire is already locking down every exit point. We'll be trapped if we don't act fast." Max nodded, his mind racing. He couldn't believe how quickly things had escalated. One small signal, and the entire galaxy was about to erupt in war. "What's the plan?" Max asked, determination flooding his veins. "We make a strike," Corin replied, his eyes hardening. "We hit them before they can hit us. We don't have the luxury of a slow buildup. Alara's allies are scattered, but we can rally them. We need to show the Empire that humanity isn't going to go down without a fight. We need to give them something to fear." Max clenched his fists, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had never asked for this. He had never imagined he would be the one to start a war. But now it was clear that there was no turning back. He had chosen a side, and now he had to fight for it. The ship lifted off the ground, rising into the sky with a smooth motion. Max gazed out the window, watching the city below shrink into the distance. The Empire's warships hovered ominously above, like vultures waiting to strike. But he wasn't afraid anymore. This was his fight now. As the ship broke through the atmosphere, Corin spoke again, his tone more serious than ever. "Max, I need you to understand something. The battle we're about to face is bigger than just us. The Empire won't just give up. They won't be swayed by our efforts. This will be a long fight, and many will fall. But we have something they don't. What's that? Max asked, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. Hope, Corin said. The Empire's power is built on fear, on control. But we have something more powerful, the belief that we can change things. The Empire may have the weapons, but we have the heart. Max looked out the window, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something greater. He was fighting for humanity, for the future, and for the freedom to choose their own path. As the ship raced toward the stars, the war had only just begun. But Max knew one thing for certain. The Empire had no idea what was coming, and it would soon learn just how strong humanity could be. The final stand. Max stared out at the stars as the ship flew deeper into the void. The galaxy, once vast and unknowable, now felt like a battleground. The rebellion, fueled by nothing but hope, had already made its mark, but it had also painted a target on humanity's back, and the Empire would not rest until every trace of this new resistance was wiped from existence. The ship's console flickered with incoming messages. Corin tapped a few keys, and the holographic display in front of Max shifted to show their current position, far from the safety of the planet, but still within striking range of the Empire's warships. Where's Alara? Max asked again, unable to shake the image of her still trapped in the heart of the city. Corin's jaw tightened. We lost contact with her ship shortly after the diversion. She's not the kind to run. We'll have to trust she's got a plan of her own. Max clenched his fists. He didn't trust the silence that hung in the air. Alara's disappearance felt like a bad omen. But now wasn't the time to dwell on that. They had to focus. They had to strike back, or this war would be over before it even began. We're not alone, Corin muttered, his voice low. He tapped a few more buttons, zooming in on a new set of data on the display. Max leaned forward. His eyes widened as he saw a cluster of rebel ships, small but determined, moving into position. They've gathered, Max said, his voice rising in disbelief. We have an army. Corin's lips curved into a rare smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. It's not an army, but it's enough to make a dent. The fleet consisted of dozens of ships, each one built from the wreckage of old space stations, damaged civilian vessels, and the remnants of ships that had escaped the Empire's clutches over the years. But even though they were outmatched, they had one advantage. They knew the terrain better than anyone. The Empire's fleet may have the firepower, but the rebels had the will. Max stood tall, his gaze locking with Corin's. We take the fight to them. Now. Corin nodded. Exactly. We need to hit them hard, before they can retaliate in full. You'll lead the first wave. Show the Empire that we're not just some ragtag group of rebels. We're human. Max swallowed, his throat dry. This wasn't a game anymore. This was real. But in his heart, he knew he couldn't back down. Alara had trusted him, and the rebellion had placed its faith in him. There was no turning back now. The ships rallied around them, their lights flickering like tiny sparks in the vastness of space. Max's pulse quickened as the tension thickened. They were about to engage the Empire. He had never been in a battle of this scale before, and the thought of what could happen to them, and to Alara, sent a chill down his spine. As they approached the first of the Empire's ships, the vastness of their enemy's power became clear. The warship was massive, dwarfing their little fleet. It moved like a predator through the stars, its guns bristling, its shields glowing with menacing energy. But Max wasn't afraid. Not anymore. We'll hit their engines first, Corin instructed. If we can cripple their movement, we can pick off their smaller ships and whittle them down. But we need to do it quickly. Max nodded and moved into position, his fingers gripping the controls as his ship's weapons powered up. The hum of the engines was replaced by the sharp crackling of energy pulses charging up. He could feel the sweat on his palms as the countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Corin's voice echoed through the comms. The silence was deafening, And then, with a loud bang, the first wave of fire erupted from their ships. Max's heart surged as the blast hit the Empire's warship. For a split second, there was nothing but silence, a heartbeat of emptiness, before the massive ship shields flared brightly, absorbing the impact. The battle was on. Max's ship jolted as enemy fire crashed into their hull, but they had already made their mark. The engine of the Empire's warship began to sputter, its systems beginning to fail. The rebellion had dealt the first blow, and the Empire had been rocked, just for a moment. But that moment was enough. "Keep moving," Corin yelled, pulling Max back into focus. "We need to stay ahead of them." Max's fingers flew over the controls, his every sense focused on the task ahead. The Empire's retaliatory fire was heavy, and their ships began to close in. But the rebels were faster, their smaller, more nimble ships dancing through the chaos. Max dodged and weaved, his heart pounding in his ears, the stakes higher than ever before. "Take them down," Max roared into the comms, urging his fleet forward. The rebel ships surged with newfound energy, targeting the Empire's smaller craft. It was a dance of survival, firing, dodging, and weaving through the stars. The battle had become a blur of bright flashes, explosions, and chaos. But then, something changed. A massive explosion rocked the Empire's lead ship, sending debris scattering across the void. For a moment, Max thought they had struck a critical blow, but when the smoke cleared, he saw the truth. The Empire wasn't retreating. It was regrouping. A massive shadow appeared in the distance, a second wave of warships, larger and deadlier than before. They had brought reinforcements. "We can't hold them off forever," Corin said grimly, his eyes scanning the new threat. Max gritted his teeth. There was no turning back now. They had started this fight, and they couldn't stop until it was over. "We're not running," Max said, his voice steel hard with resolve. "We push forward. We fight until the end." In that moment, as the Empire's reinforcements loomed closer, Max realized something. This was more than just a battle for survival. It was a battle for everything. The future of humanity, the future of the rebellion, and the future of the galaxy itself. The final stand had begun.